Hi, and thanks for watching. I'm Bill Straub, the editor of ModernThirst.com. Today we're going to taste a new bourbon from George Remus, the Repeal Day Reserve. This is a new limited release from MGP. Ingredients, and if you're not familiar with Repeal Day, that's December 5th, 1933. It's the anniversary of the repeal of Prohibition. And if you read ModernThirst.com, you're probably already aware of MGP, and if you're not, MGP is a huge distillery of over 170 years old operating in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And traditionally, they don't make whiskey for their own use, but instead they produce it on contract for other labels. So basically, they are the source for most people's source whiskey. They're widely known for their rye, and they've made some of the most desirable ryes on the market in the past few years, including Old Scout, a lot of the Willet, even Bullet. But in recent years, they've been distilling a lot of bourbon for some big names as well. And in November of 2016, they actually purchased the rights to the label of George Remus. Now they produce bourbon under the George Remus name for themselves, and George Remus himself was a Cincinnati lawyer who created one of the most successful bootlegging operations of the Prohibition era. He's called the king of the bootleggers in a lot of places. He owned all sorts of distilleries himself. He became a very rich man, a multimillionaire, and some have even claimed that he inspired the character of Jay Gatsby in F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic The Great Gatsby. Who knows? But George Remus Repeal Day Reserve is made up of 3 different bourbons made by MGP. 50% of it was distilled in 2005 using their standard bourbon mash bill, which is 21% rye. 15% of it was made up of the 2006 distillation of the high rye bourbon mash bill, and that's around 36% rye in the mash bill. And then the remaining 35% is 2006 standard mash bill bourbon from MGP. So that makes it right around 11 years old, and it's bottled at 94 proof. The bottle itself is pretty nice. They call it Art Deco. Bottle we received was a sample, and it came with a nice velvet black bag, kind of reminiscent of the Van Winkle offerings. But with that said, let's go ahead and have a taste. I hope it shows up well on camera, but it's a kind of a light brown, little bit of amber in appearance. It's very attractive. Lots of rye on the nose, which is very typical of MGP. A lot of oak. There's some butterscotch and some dark fruits in there, kind of maybe a plum or a raisin. Very nice. So on the palate, let's check it out. Yeah, so the nose definitely carries through. There's a ton of rye on this. It's very spicy, very peppery, like you would expect. There is some dark fruit on the back end of that, and there's a lot of vanilla and butterscotch on the front of the palate. And plenty of oak on the back end too. It's aged pretty well, as a matter of fact. So the finish is kind of probably in the medium to long range. Again, the rye is the dominant figure here. There is a little bit of butterscotch and plenty of oak and some barrel tannins on the back end of this. But all in all, I think it's a pretty darn good bourbon. I can understand why they chose to use this as their limited release. It's one of the better aged MGP bourbons I've had, as a matter of fact. It should be right up there with some of the bottlings of the Smooth Ambler Old Scout. It's really tasty, as a matter of fact. This is a well-aged, it's probably at the right proof. Any more than this might be a little tough to handle. 94 proof seems to work really well here. So this is going to be available for $74.99 starting November 13th. And it's only going to be available in a few states. So there's Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Kansas, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, and Wisconsin. So that's what, 9 states. So I would suggest picking this up. I think it's really worth it. I think on the Modern Thirst scale, this is probably going to come in right around a 90, probably 89 to 90. I really like MGP mash bills and MGP distillate in general, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I think if you're a fan of a lot of those source bourbons that use it, you'll be a fan of this as well, particularly if you like a lot of rye in your bourbon. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. On Twitter, we're at modern_thirst, and check us out for whiskey news and hundreds of whiskey reviews at ModernThirst.com. Cheers!